Captain Jiho Kim stepped off the transport ship and looked around the massive space station. The metal walls gleamed under bright lights, and alien symbols covered every surface. He had trained for this moment for 3 years, but his heart still beat fast. This was humanity's first big meeting with the Vex-High Empire, and everything had to go perfectly. "Captain, the alien delegation is waiting in the main hall," said Mira Park, walking beside him. She was Earth's best language expert, and knew more about alien cultures than anyone else. Her long black hair was tied back in a neat bun, and she carried a small computer filled with translation programs. Taemin Lee, their security chief, followed close behind. His hand rested on his weapon, and his eyes watched every corner. "I don't like this place," he whispered. "Too many hiding spots." Suin Choi, their communications officer, was busy checking her equipment. "All channels are open, Captain. Earth Command is standing by." Jiho nodded and straightened his uniform. The blue fabric with gold stripes showed his rank as a diplomatic captain. He was 32 years old and had spent most of his adult life preparing for moments like this. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen. They walked through long corridors filled with strange artwork. The Vex-High had built this station as a neutral meeting place between different alien species. It was huge, with rooms for hundreds of delegates and enough space for small armies. The air smelled different here, like flowers mixed with metal. "Remember," Mira said quietly, "the Vex-High are very formal. They care a lot about status and relationships. Their society is run by queens, and showing respect is extremely important." "I've read all the files," Jiho replied. "Trade agreements, technology sharing, mutual defense. We need this deal to work." They reached the main diplomatic hall, and Jiho stopped breathing for a moment. The room was enormous, with a ceiling that curved up like the inside of a giant dome. Thousands of lights created patterns like stars in the night sky. At the far end of the room sat a throne made of what looked like crystal and silver. On the throne sat the most beautiful being Jiho had ever seen. Queen Avatesh was tall, maybe 7 feet, with skin that seemed to glow with a soft blue light. Her hair was white as snow and flowed down past her shoulders. She wore robes that changed colors as she moved, shifting from deep purple to silver to gold. But it was her eyes that made Jiho stop walking. They were bright silver, like looking at liquid metal, and they seemed to see right through him. Around the throne stood dozens of other Vex-High. They were all tall and elegant, with the same glowing skin but in different shades. Some had green light, others had gold or pink. They all watched the human delegation with curious eyes. "Welcome, humans of Earth," Queen Avatesh said. Her voice was like music, with sounds that human throats could never make. The translation device in Jiho's ear turned her words into Korean, but he could still hear the beauty of her original language underneath. "Your Majesty," Jiho said, walking forward and bowing the way Mira had taught him. "I am Captain Jiho Kim, representing the United Earth Government. We are honored to meet with you." The Queen studied him for a long moment. Her silver eyes moved from his face to his uniform to his hands. The other Vex-High whispered among themselves in their musical language. Jiho felt like he was being examined under a microscope. "Captain Kim," the Queen said slowly, "you come seeking trade agreements between our peoples. You want our technology and access to our shipping routes. Yes, Your Majesty. We believe both our species could benefit from cooperation." The Queen leaned forward on her throne. The whispers around the room got louder. Some of the Vex-High looked excited. Others seemed worried. Jiho felt sweat on his forehead but tried to stay calm. "Before we discuss such matters," Queen Avatesh said, "I must ask you something important." She stood up from her throne. Even at a distance, Jiho could feel the power that surrounded her like an invisible force. Every Vex-High in the room became completely silent. The only sound was the soft humming of the station's engines. Queen Avatesh walked down from her throne platform. Her feet made no sound on the crystal floor. She moved like she was floating rather than walking. As she got closer, Jiho could see that her skin really did glow with its own light. Tiny patterns moved under the surface like living tattoos. She stopped just a few feet away from him. This close, her silver eyes seemed to look into his soul. Jiho felt like she could read every thought he had ever had. Human, she said, and her voice was softer now, but somehow more powerful. Are you unclaimed? The question hit Jiho like a physical blow. Behind him, he heard Mira gasp. Taemin's hand moved to his weapon. Suin made a small sound of surprise. Jiho's mind raced. He had studied Vex high culture for months, but this question was not in any of his briefing materials. Being claimed was part of their social system, he knew that much. It had something to do with relationships and status. But why was the Queen asking him this? I don't understand, Your Majesty, he said carefully. The Queen's eyes never left his face. Around the room, the other Vexi were making soft sounds that his translator couldn't interpret. Some seemed excited, others worried, and a few looked angry. In our society, Queen Avatesh explained, every individual is claimed by another. It creates bonds of protection, loyalty, and purpose. Those who are unclaimed have no place, no status, no protection. They are invisible to us. Jiho felt his heart sink. If being unclaimed meant having no status, then admitting it might ruin the negotiations before they even started. But lying to an alien queen seemed like an even worse idea. I am unmarried, if that's what you mean, he said honestly. I have no wife or husband. On Earth, we don't have a claiming system like yours. The Queen tilted her head slightly. Her glowing skin seemed to pulse brighter for a moment. So you are unclaimed, she said. It wasn't a question this time. Yes, Your Majesty, I am unclaimed. The room exploded with whispers and musical sounds from the Vex-High delegation. Some pointed at Jiho, others covered their mouths in shock. A few looked at Queen Avatesh with expressions that Jiho couldn't read, but the Queen herself smiled. It was the first time she had shown any emotion, and her smile was both beautiful and terrifying. How very interesting, she said. The meeting hall fell silent as Queen Avatesh continued to study Jiho with those strange silver eyes. The other Vex-High whispered among themselves, their musical voices creating a soft buzz that filled the huge room. Jiho stood perfectly still, unsure if he had just made a terrible mistake. Your Majesty, Mira Park stepped forward carefully. Perhaps we could discuss the meaning of this claiming system in private? Captain Kim meant no disrespect. One of the Vex-High near the throne made a sharp sound. She was tall even for her species, with skin that glowed deep purple and hair that seemed to move by itself. Her eyes, bright gold instead of silver, fixed on Jiho with obvious dislike. I am Velira, advisor to the Queen, she said through the translators. An unclaimed being has no right to speak in this hall. They are nothing. Less than nothing. Queen. Avatesh raised one elegant hand, and Velira immediately went quiet. The Queen's power over her people was absolute. She could silence a room with a gesture and command armies with a word. Velira speaks our old ways, the Queen said calmly. But perhaps it is time for new ways. Captain Kim, you interest me greatly. She began walking around Jiho in a slow circle. Her flowing robes made soft sounds like wind through leaves. Taemin tensed, ready to protect his captain, but Jiho shook his head slightly. Any aggressive move could destroy everything. In our history, Queen Avatesh continued, no one has ever remained unclaimed by choice. Every child is claimed by their parents, every adult by their spouse or patron. It creates a web of relationships that holds our entire society together. But it also makes us weak, said a younger Vex-High. She had bright green skin and looked much younger than the others. The old bonds trap us in old ways of thinking. Velira turned toward the younger alien, with anger flashing in her golden eyes. Zephyra, you speak foolishness. Our claiming system has kept peace for 1,000 years. Peace? Yes, Zephyra replied bravely, but also stagnation. We have not grown or changed. We simply maintain what was. Queen Avatesh smiled at this exchange. You see, Captain Kim, my people are divided about many things. Some want to keep the old ways forever. Others want to try something new. Your presence here may help us decide. Jiho felt like he was standing in the middle of a minefield. Every word could explode in his face. Your Majesty, I'm just here to negotiate a trade agreement. I don't want to interfere in your internal politics. The Queen laughed, and the sound was like bells ringing. But you already have interfered simply by existing. An unclaimed being who speaks with authority, who commands a ship, who represents an entire world. This should be impossible. She stopped walking and stood directly in front of him again. This close, Jiho could see the tiny patterns moving under her glowing skin. They looked like circuits or veins made of light. "I could claim you," she said quietly. The words seemed to echo in the vast room. Every Vexahai went completely silent. Behind Jiho, he heard Suin's sharp intake of breath and Taemin's soft curse. What would that mean? Jiho asked, though he was afraid of the answer. "It would make you mine," Queen Avatesh said simply. "My responsibility, my property, my weapon. You would have status in our society, but you would belong to me completely. Your thoughts, your loyalty, your very life would be bound to mine." Valira stepped forward eagerly. "Yes, Your Majesty. Claim the human and show everyone your power. Even these strange aliens cannot resist your authority." But Zephyra looked worried. "Your Majesty, humans are different. Their minds might not accept claiming the way ours do. It could damage both of you." Queen Avatesh ignored both of them and kept staring at Jiho. "What do you say, Captain? Would you accept my claim to gain everything your people want? Trade, routes worth trillions of credits, technology that could advance your civilization by centuries, protection from species that see humans as nothing more than clever animals." Jiho's mind raced. This wasn't what anyone had expected. Earth's leaders had prepared him for negotiations about shipping contracts and mining rights, not questions about his personal relationships or some alien bonding system. "I need to understand more," he said carefully. "What exactly does claiming involve?" A new voice spoke from the back of the room. "It involves the neural pathways being rewritten." Everyone turned to see an elderly Vexhai walking forward slowly. She was ancient even, by their standards, with skin that barely glowed and hair like silver threads. But her eyes were sharp and intelligent. "Elder Vixena," Queen Avatesh said with respect. "Please, tell us what you know." The old alien moved slowly to the center of the room. "I have studied claiming for 3 centuries. It is not just a social custom. It creates actual physical and mental bonds between individuals. The claimed person's brain changes to match their claimant's patterns. They share emotions, sometimes thoughts, often pain." "That sounds like slavery," Taemin said angrily. Elder Vixena shook her head. "Not slavery, more like becoming part of a larger organism, but humans—" She paused and looked at Jiho with interest. "Human brains may be too independent. The process might kill you, or drive you insane, or simply fail completely." Queen Avatesh didn't seem bothered by this warning. If anything, she looked more interested. A risk worth taking, perhaps. "Captain Kim, your answer?" Before Jiho could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed on the walls, and a mechanical voice spoke in several different languages, including Earth Standard. "All personnel to emergency stations. Unknown ships approaching. All personnel to emergency stations." Taemin immediately moved to Jiho's side. "Captain, we need to get back to our ship." But Queen Avatesh raised her hand again. "No one leaves this room. Guards, secure all entrances." Dozens of Vex-High warriors appeared from hidden doors. They wore armor that seemed to be made of the same crystal material as the Queen's throne, and they carried weapons that hummed with energy. In seconds, the diplomatic meeting had become something much more dangerous. Suin was frantically working with her communication equipment. "Captain, I'm getting reports of at least 50 ships. They're not broadcasting any identification codes. Your Majesty," Valira said urgently, "we should evacuate to the flagship immediately." But Queen Avatesh was still staring at Jiho with those piercing silver eyes. "Captain Kim, it seems we have little time for long discussions. Enemy ships approach, and decisions must be made quickly." "Who are they?" Jiho asked. "Most likely the hegemony," Elder Vixena said grimly. 3 species that hate both humans and Vex-High. They would see this meeting as their worst nightmare come true. The station shook as something exploded nearby. The lights flickered, and several small objects fell from the ceiling. The attack had begun. Queen Avatesh stepped closer. "Tojiho, I offer you my claim, human. Accept it, and your people will have everything they dreamed of. Refuse it, and we may all die here today as strangers. Jiho looked around the room at the faces watching him. Mira looked terrified but determined. Taemin was ready to fight. Suin was still trying to contact Earth. The Vex High were divided between hope and fear, and in the center of it all stood a beautiful alien queen offering him power and protection at a price he didn't fully understand. Another explosion shook the station, closer this time. Emergency lights cast everything in red shadows. "Your answer, Captain?" Queen Avatesh demanded. The station shook violently as more explosions echoed through the metal walls. Jiho grabbed onto a nearby pillar to keep his balance while Queen Avatesh stood perfectly still, as if the chaos around them couldn't touch her. "Your Majesty," Velira shouted over the noise of alarms, "we must retreat to the ships now." But before anyone could move, the main doors burst open with a crash of twisted metal. Strange creatures poured into the diplomatic hall, firing energy weapons that left glowing holes in the walls. They looked like giant insects walking on two legs, with hard shells covering their bodies and multiple arms ending in claws and weapons. "Hegemony forces!" Taemin yelled, pulling out his pistol and pushing Jiho behind cover. The Vex High guards reacted instantly, their crystal weapons creating beams of pure light that cut through the attackers. But more enemies kept coming through the broken doors, and the beautiful diplomatic hall became a battlefield. Queen Avatesh raised both hands, and suddenly the air around her began to glow. Energy flowed from her body like visible electricity, striking the nearest attackers and turning them to ash. Her power was incredible, but even she couldn't fight dozens of enemies alone. "Suin!" Jiho called to his communications officer. "Can you reach our ship?" "Trying, Captain." She was crouched behind an overturned table, working frantically with her equipment. "The station's communications are being jammed!" A new sound joined the chaos of battle. Vex High soldiers were pouring into the hall from the other entrances, but these weren't wearing the same crystal armor as Queen Avatesh's guards. Their uniforms were dark red, and they were fighting against the Queen's forces. "Traitors!" Velira screamed, firing her weapon at the rebels. "Prince Ixalmoth has betrayed us!" Elder Vixena moved surprisingly fast for her age, reaching Jiho's hiding spot just as an energy blast destroyed the pillar he was hiding behind. "Captain Kim, this is not just an external attack. Someone inside the Vex High Empire wants the Queen dead." "Why are you helping us?" Jiho asked as they moved to better cover. "Because you represent something new," the old alien said. "Change that could save us all." Across the battle, Queen Avatesh was fighting like a force of nature. Her energy blasts destroyed enemies and rebels alike, while she moved through the chaos with impossible grace. But Jiho could see she was getting tired. There were too many attackers, and the battle was spreading throughout the entire station. "Mira!" he called to his language expert. "Can you understand what the rebels are saying?" She listened carefully to the Vex High rebels shouting over the noise of weapons. "They're talking about purification, something about destroying the contamination before it spreads." "They mean us," Taemin said grimly, firing at an insect-like hegemony soldier. "They think humans will ruin their precious society." A massive explosion shook the station so hard that everyone fell to the ground. The beautiful dome ceiling cracked, and pieces of crystal and metal began falling like deadly rain. Emergency lights flickered on and off, casting everything in red and darkness by turns. "The main reactor is failing," Suin reported. "Captain, if we don't evacuate soon, this whole station will blow up." Queen Avatesh heard this and made a decision. She let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream and wasn't quite a song, but it made every Vex High in the room stop fighting for a moment. Even the rebels froze. "All loyal forces, retreat to the ships," she commanded. Her voice somehow reached every corner of the massive room despite the noise. "Protect the humans!" Velira appeared at the Queen's side, her purple skin flickering with energy. "Your Majesty, the flagship is ready for immediate departure." But as they began moving toward the emergency exits, a new group of enemies blocked their path. These weren't insect-like hegemony soldiers. They were Vex High, but different somehow. Their skin was darker, almost gray, and their eyes glowed with an unnatural red light. "Prince Ixalmoth," Queen Avatesh said with cold anger. The leader of this new group was tall even for a Vex High, with broad shoulders and scars across his gray skin. His red eyes fixed on Queen Avatesh with hatred that seemed to burn the air. Between them, "My dear aunt," Prince Ixalmoth said with mock politeness. "How wonderful to see you again. I trust you're enjoying your last diplomatic meeting." "You betray your own people for the hegemony?" Queen Avatesh demanded. "I save my people from contamination," the prince replied. "These humans would poison our claiming system with their independence. Better to destroy both you and them than let that happen." He raised a weapon unlike anything Jiho had seen before. It looked like it was made of living shadow, and it made a sound like screaming when he pointed it at the queen. "The old ways die. Today," Prince Ixalmoth declared. But before he could fire, something unexpected happened. Zephyra, the young Vexhai who had spoken about change, threw herself between the prince and queen. The shadow weapon struck her instead, and she collapsed with a cry of pain. "Foolish child!" the prince snarled. That moment of distraction was enough. Queen Avatesh released all her power at once, creating a blast of energy that sent Prince Ixalmoth and his followers flying across the room. But the effort left her weak and stumbling. "Now we run!" Elder Vixena said urgently. They fought their way through the corridors of the dying station. Jiho found himself staying close to Queen Avatesh, helping support her when she stumbled. Behind them, the sounds of battle grew louder as more hegemony forces boarded the station. "Captain," Taman called out, "I can see the docking bay ahead." But the way was blocked by more enemies. Dozens of hegemony soldiers and Vexhai rebels waited for them with weapons ready. It looked impossible to get through. "I have an idea," Jiho said suddenly. "Your Majesty, can you create a claiming bond temporarily, just for the battle?" Queen Avatesh looked at him with surprise. "It would be dangerous, and possibly permanent." "Better than being dead," Jiho replied. Around them, energy blasts were getting closer. They were running out of time and options. "Very well," Queen Avatesh said. She reached out and took Jiho's hand. The moment their skin touched, Jiho felt like lightning was running through his brain. Images flashed through his mind that weren't his own memories. He could feel Queen Avatesh's thoughts mixing with his. Her strength flowing into his body, her centuries of knowledge suddenly available to him, but she was also feeling his human determination, his tactical training, his stubborn refusal to give up. For the first time in her life, Queen Avatesh experienced the chaotic creativity of a human mind. Together, they were something entirely new. "This is impossible," Elder Vixena whispered in amazement. "You're sharing the bond equally. Neither is dominating the other." Jiho and Queen Avatesh moved as one person. They could predict each other's actions perfectly, coordinate without speaking, and fight with a precision that seemed superhuman. Their combined tactics confused the enemies, who had never seen anything like it. They carved a path through the attackers, reaching the docking bay just as another massive explosion shook the station. The Queen's flagship waited for them. "Its engines already running! Get everyone aboard!" Jiho shouted, still feeling the Queen's presence in his mind. As they reached the ship, Jiho looked back at the station they were leaving behind. Fires burned throughout its structure, and pieces were already breaking away and floating into space. The first diplomatic meeting between humans and Vexhai was ending in destruction and war. But something new had been created in the chaos. The bond between Jiho and Queen Avatesh was still active, still changing both of them in ways neither fully understood. "What happens now?" he asked her as their ship pulled away from the dying station. Queen Avatesh smiled, and for the first time, it looked completely human. "Now we discover what we've become." The Queen's flagship was a massive ship that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of crystal. Jiho walked through corridors filled with soft light while still feeling Queen Avatesh's presence in his mind. The bond they had created during the battle was different from anything either of them had expected. Captain Kim. Mira Park found him in the medical bay where doctors were treating the wounded. "Earth Command is demanding a full report. They want to know what happened during the negotiations." Jiho touched his forehead, where he could still feel the alien queen's thoughts mixing with his own. "Tell them the situation is complicated. We'll report when we understand it better ourselves." Across the medical bay, Queen Avatesh was having her own conversations with worried advisors. Velera stood beside her, speaking quickly in their musical language. But even without understanding the words, Jiho could feel the Queen's frustration through their bond. The claiming process is supposed to create a clear hierarchy, Elder Vixena explained, as she examined both Jiho and the Queen with strange medical devices. One person becomes dominant, the other becomes submissive. But your bond shows no hierarchy at all. You are truly equals. Is that dangerous? Jiho asked. Unknown, the elderly scientist admitted. This has never happened before in our recorded history. Young Zafara was recovering from her injuries on a nearby bed. Despite her pain, she seemed excited by what she had witnessed. Don't you see? This proves that the old claiming system can evolve. Humans might be the key to our people's future. But not everyone agreed. Prince Ixalmoth had escaped during the station's destruction, and reports were coming in from across the HFY Empire. Many nobles were angry about the Queen's actions, and some were calling for her to break the bond with the human immediately. Your Majesty, Velira said through the translators, the Noble Council demands an explanation. They say bonding with an alien is against our most sacred laws. Queen Avatesh looked tired but determined. Let them complain. What we have discovered here is more important than their old fears. She walked over to where Jiho was sitting. Even though they were several feet apart, he could feel her emotions as clearly as his own. The connection was getting stronger instead of weaker. Captain Kim, she said formally, we need to talk privately. They went to the Queen's private chambers, a beautiful room filled with furniture that seemed to grow from the crystal walls themselves. Through large windows they could see the stars and the distant glow of the destroyed station. What's happening to us? Jiho asked directly. Queen Avatesh sat in a chair that adjusted itself to her body automatically. I believe we are becoming something new. The bond between us is unlike any claiming in HFY history. We share thoughts and feelings, but we remain ourselves. Can it be broken? Yes, but... She paused, and Jiho felt her uncertainty through the connection. I don't think either of us wants that. We are stronger together than we ever were apart. It was true. Jiho could feel his own tactical abilities enhanced by the Queen's centuries of experience. He could understand alien technologies and cultures in ways that would have taken years to learn, and through their bond, he knew that Queen Avatesh was experiencing human creativity and adaptability for the first time. My people won't understand this, Jiho said. Earth's leaders expected a simple trade agreement, not their diplomatic captain bonding with an alien queen. My people understand. It even less, Queen Avatesh replied. Many will see this as betrayal of everything we believe in. A soft chime announced an incoming message. Suin's voice came through the room's communication system. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. Prime Minister Suhyun Han wants to speak with you immediately. Jiho sighed. The politicians back home would not be happy about any of this. Put her through. The wall of the Queen's chamber became a display screen showing a conference room on Earth. Prime Minister Han sat at a long table with several military officers and diplomatic advisors. Her expression was not friendly. Captain Kim, she began, without pleasantries, explain to me why our first contact mission has turned into an interstellar war. Prime Minister, the situation developed rapidly. We were attacked by forces calling themselves the Hegemony, working with HFY rebels. And what about these reports that you've undergone some kind of alien bonding process? Jiho felt Queen Avatesh's presence in his mind, supporting him. It was necessary to survive the battle. The Queen and I formed a temporary alliance. Temporary. One of the military officers leaned forward. Our intelligence suggests this bonding process is permanent and affects human brain chemistry. Before Jiho could answer, another voice joined the conversation. Admiral Nari O appeared on a separate screen. She was commanding the Earth fleet that was rushing toward their location. Captain Kim, I have 12 ships arriving in your sector within 6 hours. Do you need immediate evacuation? Admiral, the situation is stable for now, but we need to be prepared for additional attacks. Queen Avatesh stepped into view of the camera. Prime Minister Han's eyes widened as she saw the alien queen for the first time. Your Excellency, Queen Avatesh said with perfect diplomatic courtesy. I am Queen Avatesh of the HFY Empire. Captain Kim has acted with great honor during our crisis. Your Majesty, Prime Minister Han replied carefully, we appreciate your cooperation. but we're concerned about the nature of this bond between you and our representative. As are many of my own people, the Queen admitted, but perhaps that is precisely why it is necessary. The conversation was interrupted by alarms on the Vex-High ship. Valera's voice came through the communication system, speaking rapidly in the alien language. "What's happening?" Jiho asked, already feeling Queen Avatesh's sudden concern through their bond. "Long-range sensors detect a massive fleet approaching," the Queen said grimly. "The hegemony is bringing everything they have." Admiral O's image leaned forward. "Captain, what are we looking at?" Queen Avatesh gestured, and the wall display changed to show a tactical map of the local star system. Hundreds of red dots were moving toward their position. 300 ships, she said. "The combined fleets of the hegemony species. They mean to destroy both our peoples here and now." "That's 10 times what our fleet can handle," Admiral O said quietly. "Prime Minister." Han looked grim. "Captain Kim, I'm ordering you to return to Earth immediately. This is beyond our capabilities." But Jiho felt something through his bond with Queen Avatesh, a certainty, a knowledge that came from her centuries of experience with galactic politics. "Prime Minister," he said, "if we run now, they'll hunt down every human colony. This isn't just about us anymore. The hegemony sees any cooperation between species as a threat." "What do you propose?" she asked. Queen Avatesh spoke up. "A joint defense. Human tactics combined with Vex-High technology. Captain Kim and I have discovered that our bonded minds can coordinate fleets in ways neither species could achieve alone." "You're talking about using untested alien technology in battle," one of the military advisors protested. "We're talking about survival," Jiho replied. Through his bond with Queen Avatesh, he could see tactical possibilities that amazed him. "This could work, but only if both our fleets work together completely." Admiral O studied the tactical display. "Captain, you're asking me to trust the lives of 12,000 Earth sailors to an alien bonding process we don't understand." "Admiral," Jiho said, feeling the Queen's confidence flowing through him, "I'm asking you to trust that sometimes the impossible is the only option." On the display, the red dots of the hegemony fleet were getting closer. Soon, there would be no time left for discussion or doubt. Prime Minister Han made the decision that would change everything. "Admiral O, you have operational command. Work with the aliens. Captain Kim, don't make me regret this." As the communication ended, Queen Avatesh took Jiho's hand. The bond between them flared with new strength. "Are you ready to show the galaxy what humans and Vex-High can accomplish together?" she asked. Jiho smiled, feeling more certain than he ever had in his life. "Let's make history." The combined human and Vex-High fleets faced the largest space battle in galactic history. Jiho stood on the bridge of Queen Avatesh's flagship, feeling her presence in his mind as they coordinated the defense of two civilizations. "Human ships are in position," Admiral Nario reported through the communication system. 12 vessels against their 300. We're seriously outnumbered." "Numbers don't tell the whole story," Queen Avatesh replied, her silver eyes focused on the tactical displays. Through their bond, Jiho could feel her calm confidence mixing with his own strategic thinking. The hegemony fleet approached like a dark cloud across the stars. The insect-like ships moved in perfect formation, their weapons already charging for the attack. Behind them came vessels from 2 other species, the rock-like granite lords and the energy beings called the Flux Collective. All 3 had one thing in common. They hated the idea of different species working together. "Captain Jaewon Seo reporting," came a young voice over the communications. He was commanding humanity's newest warship, the Soul's Pride. "My crew is ready for whatever comes." Jiho smiled. Captain Seo was only 28 years old, but he had graduated at the top of his class from Earth's Naval Academy. His fresh thinking might be exactly what they needed. "All ships, listen carefully," Jiho broadcast to both fleets. "We're going to do something that's never been tried before. Human and Vex-High vessels will fight as pairs, sharing targeting data and coordinating attacks." Velira, standing nearby on the bridge, looked worried. "Your Majesty, our ship captains have never worked with aliens before. This could cause more confusion than help." But Queen Avatesh raised her hand for silence. "Trust in the bond, Velira." Captain Kim and I can coordinate both fleets through our connection. It was true. Through their shared consciousness, Jiho could feel the location and status of every friendly ship. Queen Avatesh's knowledge of Vex-High technology combined with his human tactical training created possibilities neither could have imagined alone. Hegemony fleet entering weapons range, Suin reported from her station. They're targeting our command ships first. Let them come, Jiho said calmly. All ships execute pattern Delta 7. The human and Vex-High ships began moving in a complex dance that confused the enemy commanders. Instead of the traditional battle lines, the Allied fleet split into small groups that supported each other in ways the hegemony had never seen before. Captain Seo's voice came through clearly. Soul's Pride paired with Vex-High vessel Crystal Song. We're moving to flank position. Confirmed, replied the Crystal Song's captain in heavily accented English. Human ship provides targeting data. We provide firepower. The first exchange of weapons fire lit up the darkness of space. Hegemony energy beams struck where the Allied ships should have been, but Jiho and Queen Avatesh had anticipated the attack patterns. Their coordinated movements kept casualties low while return fire found its targets. Impossible! Admiral O's voice carried amazement. How are you predicting their movements so accurately? Through the bond, Jiho felt Queen Avatesh's ancient wisdom flowing into his tactical mind. The hegemony species are rigid thinkers. They use the same attack patterns their ancestors used for thousands of years, but humans... He paused as Queen Avatesh's thoughts merged with his own. Humans are unpredictable. They adapt. The battle continued for hours. Despite being outnumbered 25-1, the Allied fleet held its position. Human creativity combined with Vex-High technology proved to be a deadly combination. When hegemony ships tried to surround small groups of Allied vessels, they found themselves caught in traps that used both species' strengths. But the enemy had advantages, too. Their ships were heavily armored and carried powerful weapons. Slowly, the Allied fleet began taking losses. We're losing the Crystal Harmony, Queen Avatesh reported sadly as one of her ships exploded in a burst of silver light. And the human vessel Toronto's Thunder is badly damaged. Fall back to defensive positions, Admiral O ordered, but Jiho felt something through his bond with the Queen. A memory that wasn't his own, knowledge of an ancient Vex-High battle technique that had been forgotten for centuries. Your Majesty, he said urgently, the resonance strike. Can we still do it? Queen Avatesh's eyes widened with understanding. Not with traditional claiming bonds, but with our connection. She paused, considering the possibilities. It might work, but it would require every Vex-High ship to trust a human mind. What's a resonance strike? Admiral O demanded. All Vex-High ships link their consciousness through their queen, Jiho explained, the alien knowledge flowing through him. They become like a single giant organism. But it's never been tried with mixed crews. Queen Avatesh stood up on the bridge, her skin glowing brighter as she prepared to use her full power. All Vex-High vessels, prepare for resonance strike. Link through the human bond. Your Majesty, Velira protested. Linking our fleet consciousness through an alien mind could destroy us all. Or save us all, Queen Avatesh replied firmly. What happened next had never occurred in galactic history. Every Vex-High ship in the Eobus fleet opened their minds to Queen Avatesh, who shared the connection with Jiho, who coordinated with every human captain. For a brief moment, dozens of ships and thousands of minds worked as one perfect organism. The resonance strike hit the hegemony fleet like a force of nature. Every Allied ship fired at exactly the same instant, their weapons perfectly coordinated to create destructive interference patterns in the enemy shields. Dozens of hegemony vessels exploded simultaneously as the perfectly timed attack overwhelmed their defenses. The surviving enemy ships broke formation and fled. The 300-ship armada that was supposed to destroy both human and Vex-High civilizations scattered across the star system in complete disorder. Incredible, Admiral O breathed over the communications. In 30 years of military service, I've never seen anything like that. But the effort had cost both Jiho and Queen Avatesh greatly. They collapsed together on the bridge, their bond flickering as exhaustion overwhelmed them. Are they all right? Captain Seo's concerned voice came through the speakers. Elder Vix Enna hurried to examine them both. They will recover, but they have changed both of their species forever. She was right. In the days that followed, other humans began forming bonds with Vex-High partners. Not the old claiming system that created masters and servants, but the new equal partnerships that Jiho and Queen Avatesh had discovered. Zephyra, recovered from her injuries, became the first Vex-High to bond with a human when she partnered with Mira Park. Their shared love of languages and cultures created a translation system that worked better than any computer. What do we call this new alliance? Prime Minister Han asked during the peace negotiations that followed the battle. Queen Avatesh and Jiho answered together, their voices perfectly synchronized through their bond. The Bound Federation. Equal. Partners choosing to share strength. Within a year, 12 other alien species had asked to join the Federation. The old galactic order of conquest and domination was being replaced by something entirely new. Cooperation that made everyone stronger. Jiho stood on the observation deck of the new Federation headquarters, watching ships from dozens of different worlds working together in the space around them. Queen Avatesh joined him, her presence in his mind as familiar and comforting as his own thoughts. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Giving up your independence to be bonded with an alien queen?" Jiho smiled and took her glowing hand in his human one. "I didn't give up my independence. I found someone worth sharing it with." Through the vast windows, they could see the lights of 100 different species working together, building something greater than any of them could have achieved alone. The question that had started it all, "Human, are you unclaimed?" had led to the most important discovery in galactic history. Some bonds made you smaller, but the right bonds made you infinite. Far in the distance, new ships were arriving every day. Species that had never trusted anyone were learning to work together. The galaxy was changing, one bond at a time, and it had all started with a simple question from an alien queen to an unclaimed human captain.